Right. So we're going to start a new moment. We're going to start the fireside chat between Robin and Job, and we're going to talk about talent sourcing in a remote world. Okay, we're starting with the very beginning, the first thing, which is sourcing. So let me introduce you to these two amazing speakers. I'm very happy to welcome them because actually, we've been thinking of all of this event with Robin, the CEO and founder of HireSweet. So basically, Robin helps startups recruit software engineers by developing a cutting-edge AI tool. So thousands of startups have been using HireSweet to grow from 10 to 100 people. And the knowledge of Robin, I'm telling you, my friends, is pure gold. And with Robin, you have Job. And Job has an amazing, amazing experience to share with you as well. Robin has been working for 5 years at GitLab. He's been growing the team there. And you know GitLab, huh? They work fully remotely. He's been growing the team remotely from 5 to 450 people from all over the world. And because of this experience, this unique experience, he started remote.com, his new company that he's going to talk about, to help you, to make it easier, basically, for organization and people to work remotely. Robin, Job, if you are here, you are welcome to take the stage and to start this fireside. Yes, I see you guys.
I'm here.
How are you?
Good. Thanks for the notes and the intro. It was great.
You're
Thanks so
welcome.
much.
Cool. So the stage is yours. You have 45 minutes. Enjoy, and I'll be back later. I'm listening to you. Thank you for being here. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, hey up. We met before, so happy to have you here again today. I suggest we start by so Alice's intro was great, I think, saying that our knowledge was gold, so it was good to hear. Maybe I can start with a quick intro presentation of my own background. Then you can do the same, and then we can jump. And we already have a plan prepared, so we have a lot to say today. All right.
Let's do that.
Okay, so I'm Robin, CEO, co-founder at HireSweet. We created a company 4 years ago. As Ali said, we worked with hundreds, not thousands of companies, not yet, but hundreds, help them hire hundreds of employees. Mostly startups, so we have that very interesting expertise on startups, and especially on the sourcing side. So we mostly help people reach out to passive candidates. So we're very focused on the outreach, even though we're specialists of the whole funnel. And I also host a podcast called 8 Players on how to build a team, hire, etc. So I'll share the link, and so I'll try to do a mix of both my experience and what I learned in this podcast today.
Thanks, Robin. I will introduce myself. So I'm Job. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Remote. That's remote.com. As we were introduced, I founded Remote specifically after experiencing at GitLab, where we had today 1,300 people in 67 different countries. And the one thing we constantly struggled with was, how do you actually pay all those people? How do you employ them all over the world? And we never really found a good solution. So I figured I would build a solution myself, and that is exactly what we did with Remote. And so what we do is we solve payroll, compliance, benefits, and just the ability to hire anyone from anywhere all over the world for now hundreds of companies.
Cool. And so again, sourcing, there's a lot to say. So maybe we can start by defining what sourcing exactly is. And sourcing is very easy, actually. It's the first step in the talent acquisition pipeline, right? But there are, I would say, 5 main steps. The first one being sourcing, then interviewing, then extending the actual offer, then closing, and then the actual onboarding, which is also part of the talent acquisition pipeline. Would you agree with these 5 steps?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think nowadays, it can get quite complex if you're in a position where you're looking for a very specific hire that and maybe to fill one position, the process is going to look very different than if you're going to look for a large amount of people. But like from a high level, I think it always looks basically like that. Yes.
Right. And so we really thought about this when we prepared the event, and we decided to focus on sourcing and interviewing. But obviously, we have a lot to say, and I would probably have more to say on the outreach. But you also have more to say on the onboarding, so we can focus on that later. So the very first step before you launch a new hire is to prepare, right? And remote work means you have to prepare differently. You can you can target people in the same city. You can target people in the same country, on the same time zone, on completely different time zones altogether. How do you prepare? What's your tips from remote, and how do you prepare when you launch a new hire in remote?
Yeah, it is very different indeed, right? Like, so previously you would have an office and you would hire someone that is close by and the near to the office or willing to relocate close to the office. So there were a lot of things you didn't have to think about, and those things included what time zone is the person. So I think for us, internally, and what we see with our customers as well, the starting point is very much with what is what is the freedom that I give myself in hiring across the world. So assuming you use us or anyone else to solve the actual part of paying people, what is the range of time zones that you want to hire someone in, or is it actually required to come into the office? There's still that option to say, well, we want someone to come into the office once in a while. But especially if you have a fully remote team, I think that first consideration is, what is the range of time zones that I want to hire in? And my recommendation usually around this is plus minus a number of hours, and that number of hours can be greater or smaller depending on how comfortable you are with working asynchronously, how much time you need to have in overlap, etc. And in certain functions, you actually want someone to be in a specific time zone. If you want to have 24/7 customer support, you might want to make sure that a person is in a particular time zone, in a particular range of time zones. If you don't know this, what I generally recommend organizations to do is like plus minus 4 hours. Start there. That gives you probably a talent pool of like 1 billion people, or at least millions of people, which should suffice. And then as your team grows, you can start to expand that. So that is really consideration number one. Like where does this person actually have to be located? And then following that, you go through a very similar process in defining what should the role look like, what is expected of the person. Another thing about time zones that's interesting here, which is something we've noticed, is that some people, they don't work according to their time zone, in a sense that you have people living maybe in the middle of Europe, but they sleep the entire morning, or they do other things. They have other things that keep them busy, and they tend to work afternoons and nights. So essentially, they're living in a US time zone, which is one of those things that up front you don't necessarily think about, because you sort of assume from the office culture that everybody works 9 to 5, but in reality, that could be very, very different. And setting expectations up front always helps with these kind of cases. Beyond that, I think starting the job description, starting to think about like what does this role look, is very, very similar to previously. Do you have any specific thoughts, Robin, that I missed here?
Well, what we see, and I'm curious to see if that's also what happens with your customers and the people you work with. But what we see is usually the company will do small steps, right? Especially if they're transitioning to remote work because of the COVID. If it's not something that's native to their company, they'll usually start by hiring someone in the same city but coming to the office just once a week or once a month. And then they'll move to someone in the same country but different cities. And once they'll build the proper infrastructure to work with these people, then they realize they don't have people to come to the office at all. And they can even work with people in different countries, and they can even work with people on different time zones. And as you say, I think there are several reasons why people move to remote work. Either they started this way, it's part of the company DNA, and well, then no question, because that's how you work, probably how you started yourself after your experience at GitLab, and then you just have to to build a new way of working. Or you can transition to that because you've been forced to with COVID, or because you think there are bigger opportunities, or because you realize that you want, again, time zone coverage, as you mentioned, having customer success teams that can provide 24 hours coverage. And so depending on the team, they will start doing differently, and depending on how mature they are with remote work, what we usually see, and maybe some people listening to us today are doing this transition right now, you don't have to start by hiring someone in a different country just right out the door, right? You can start by different cities, then different countries, and then different time zones. So that's also what we're seeing, like, moving to that. Do you work a lot? I guess you do, but do you work a lot with companies doing that drastic change because of COVID and deciding to stick with it?
To a degree, I think the strongest motivation of organizations is to just hire great talent, right? They recognize that there's not a hard need anymore to be in the office. Like maybe it was COVID that forced them to realize this, but like the reason that they work with us is not because they have to. It's because specifically they found someone great that just happens to live in another country. And we certainly have a few customers that started out because of COVID, and some companies that didn't exist before COVID also. But yeah, I think mostly it is strongly driven by just the need to hire great people, which has been really, really awesome. Like, actually, if you're starting to work remotely, my advice would be to just hire the best person you can find, and like not care too much about where they live, as long as you have those few hours of overlap that you can work together synchronously. But other than that, I would not care too much. Like the getting together is really nice, and you should do it once in a while. The money that you save with not having to buy everybody an office, you can use to organize those trips. So yeah.
And so the first part is obviously understanding the role, understanding the location, setting up clear guidelines, and then setting up expectation for the person as well. So you mentioned telling about the work hours or the location, etc., etc. And then, so before we even move to publishing the job posting and getting candidates, you have to write the actual job description. So we've been through these before, again and again and again. What's your advice on this, on writing the actual job description?
Yeah, I would say spend time on it, ask feedback, and make sure that people from different backgrounds within your organization look at it. So if everybody has a similar background and looks at it, you're probably biasing to hiring the same kind of person as you are and as the people that reviewed it. So that's an easy start. Beyond that, I'm a big fan. Like the more clear you can be about the role, about what you expect them to do, what their work is going to be like, the better it is. Like I think it will only help you the clearer you are, and the more honest and transparent you are about how the role is going to be. And about the format itself, you see many different things. I have been playing with like just writing like sort of a long post, like a short blog post, so to say, but then as a job description rather than something with lists of requirements and expectations and whatnot. I'm not sure if it works better. That's certainly to think about, but being specific and being clear, that helps. I think what you should not do is include things that are super obvious. Like if you write in your that someone should be an excellent communicator, like literally everybody's looking for that. There's no one that's going around and think to themselves, we're going to find a job where I don't have to be an excellent communicator because I'm not one. So that's an easy one. So set expectation and be realistic and respect the applicants as well. Don't tell them, you need to be able to communicate, or, that's obvious.
One of the tips that I like is to find your unfair competitive advantage, the thing that you can say that any other company couldn't say. And so the way it works is you look at your 5 closest competitors, and you think of the things they could say in the job posting, and you don't want to say that. You want to be different. And again, a good advice that we had. So we had a great podcast on this with a guy named James Ellis. He's focused on employer branding. Good episode. And what he says is the same as what Usama said before. You have to tell a story. You have to hammer that story again and again and again once you find your very competitive advantage. So, and today, being a remote team cannot be a competitive advantage, right? It might have been the case 2 years ago, but today it's not the case anymore. So you have to find your competitive advantage and then hammer that again and again and again and again, and get people home by making it very clear what's your competitive advantage, what's your strength. And also, as Usama said, a good story is not a story that everyone likes, right? You also have to, in a way, write your job description and make it on purpose that some people won't apply. And that's a good advice. And that's a good advice we had. Probably similar to your job post, right? Like it's a long blog post, so some people won't like it, won't read it. But if they don't, well, then they're probably not a good fit. Because you like blog posts, right? Write some of
Yeah,
them.
I think if you have like strong company values, this is a really good occasion to either link to them or like specifically talk about those. And the better your company values are, the more it will resonate or not resonate with particular people. And I find the best candidates that I see are people that align themselves with those values. They say, "Well, I really thought it was great that these are your values," or I can really find myself in some of these, especially because of my previous experiences, good or bad. And I think that helps a lot. And it also helps in subsequent steps if you're very clear about what those values are.
Right, and again, be clear front, be clear on the work hours, be clear on the compensation if you can, be clear on anything, because that will save a lot of time later in the sourcing. Okay, so step number 2 is actually getting candidates. So you're prepared, you have a very clear idea of who you're looking for, where they should be based. You actually wrote your first job description, you have the very clear message, so you know what you're looking for, and you have an idea of the people you don't want to apply and the people that you'll just single out with your very specific story. And now you have to get candidates. So usually there are 3 main sources for candidates, especially for startups. There's outreach, you reach out to people, passive candidates, and you try to poach people. Then there's inbound, you post a job somewhere and you wait for people to apply. There's a mix of both, which is referral. So you ask for your team for referrals. They might be happy in their jobs, or they might have come through inbound anyway, but it's again a bit different. There's a first one, but it's not very used in startups. It's internal mobility. You take someone and you just have them change jobs. So maybe I'll talk a bit about outreach, because I think I have a few tips here. But what do you see in inbound? What works best to have remote applicants from over the world? Because again, the rules are different when you want to source anywhere in the world.
So I mean, it's a high level question, but I think our experience has been very varied. To be transparent in what we see, we essentially see 2 different things. One, we see positions where the moment we post something online and we have a strong brand, we have a massive amount of applicants. And then we have the luxury problem of filtering through hundreds or sometimes even thousands of people and trying to find one person that we want to hire of that, which is a really great problem to have. But we have also experienced the opposite, where we are hiring a very specific role or role where we know there's only a few people, or people that the kind of role that we're hiring for is not necessarily people that are interested in the world that we are in, or are not necessarily interested in startups and then have not heard about us. And so our experience has been very, very varied in this, and we had to choose many different approaches. I mean, I think you have a lot more experience than I have on this, Robin. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, we actually help people post on the classic job boards, right? Like AngelList, Stack Overflow doesn't seem to be working very well, but we had some people have some success there. And I guess you can also use remote specific job boards like Remotive, Remote OK. People obviously looking for remote jobs there. It's probably more tech positions. So when you want to hire a remote engineer, they're more likely to go on Remote OK or Remotive. And what else? And then I guess you can use the specific country job boards, main job boards in each country, where you won't be competing with other remote companies, and that could be a smart thing to do as well. But again, that comes down to being sure of the location of the person you want to hire. And you mentioned that you hired people in Africa, around the world. How do you do that? Do you use country-specific job boards each time, or do you use like remote-specific job boards?
We never use country-specific job boards.
Okay.
So for us, the majority of applicants comes from the fact that we have a strong brand and people follow us on Twitter, and, tweet about it or post on LinkedIn, for example. That's where the majority comes from. For specific roles, because we don't really care where people live, we just hire people anywhere, right? That's literally our business to make that possible. So we practice that internally as well. So what we do is we go for specific boards or newsletters, for example. So let's say we hire a lot of Elixir engineers, which is a very specific language. Like there's not that many Elixir engineers in the world, and so what we do is we promote in the Elixir weekly newsletter. That's where we promote the job. We maybe sponsor it, or we make sure that we have blog posts there that are featured. Those are very good tricks for us to work. Other than that, remote job boards and such, they can help really well. I think having a strong brand is probably the easiest way of finding people. And then ultimately just networking. So if you know people that are, let's say I'm hiring someone for a specific finance position. If you know people that have a strong network in there, ask them to help you, either finding those newsletters, finding those job boards, or just simply sometimes sharing something on LinkedIn. If you, especially if you're a remote company, don't underestimate the power of just saying, look, we're a fully remote company. You can work from wherever you want. We'll buy you a MacBook and we'll pay you well. There's still way less companies that offer those kind of things than you think there are. Like, forced working from home is not the same as saying, well, I'm a company that is fully remote and we actually embrace this, and you can actually work from everywhere. So don't underestimate how strong of a benefit that actually is to people, and that should get you pretty far.
Right. And then there's outreach. So your example with the Elixir engineer is a good one, because this is closing in on actually doing some outreach. Like, you're targeting the people, you go to where they live, where they hang out, and then you just be there. And you can also reach out to them on LinkedIn. You can reach out to them on our personal emails, enroll them in email sequences, because now you can be way more specific. You have this role, you can source anywhere in the world or in the time zone that you define, and you can find those people. Most of them are either on LinkedIn, on GitHub, on Stack Overflow. So that's a lot of talent to tap in. And you can just enroll them and do that proactively, and especially for roles. And again, so that's what we're doing. So, and that's part of our product. But especially for roles, very qualified roles where you have to find top-notch talents. Then these people won't apply to your company. Even if you have a very strong brand, even Google, right? They do outreach on software engineers, because great software engineers are usually happy where they are, because their managers don't want them to leave. And so here we also recommend doing a lot of outreach, finding those people on LinkedIn. And if you did your job in a preparation step, then you know very well who you're targeting. You have a very clear job description, very clear message, very clear competitive advantage, and you can reach out to them very easily, using what we call personalization at scale. That is defining a so precise persona of the person you're looking for. You can use a generic message, and it will feel targeted, because again, you're targeting Elixir engineers who are interested in the space and who are based in Europe to offer them a remote job. So your response rate will be super high. So that's where we usually focus as well. And then referral, I don't know if you have any tips on that. You mentioned that quickly.
Yeah, a lot of the people that we hire, we find through referrals. I don't have any particular magic that works. Again, I think it's good to be shameless to your network and the network of your colleagues, and be like, look, we always have an internal referral program. So if you refer someone that we actually hire and that stays on for a while, the person referring them gets a bonus, and that bonus has to be not insignificant, because otherwise, like, the motivation is low. You want someone to really bring someone in, and that can help a lot. And just being shameless about these kind of things, and like actually asking, because you are ultimately doing something nice, which is you're getting someone a new, better job. Right? They won't take it if it's not a better job. So being shameless about it, and just asking your network to either reach out, to recommend particular people, and going that route. Usually when you get someone referred, they already have a job, so you will have to poach them away and do a really good job, which is a great practice also about the other things that we spoke about. Like what are your unfair advantages as a company for hiring this specific person? Do you have clearly defined values, and is it what you're offering actually competitive with the place where that person is right now? And if it's not, like, how do you expect to continue to hire people like that? So it can be a good exercise. I don't think there's particular magic involved. What do you think, Robin?
We heard a few recipes. I don't know how they work, but that's interesting. Like the first one being every person that joins the company on their first day, you ask them 5 person they would like to join the company again. They worked with in the past and they would like them to join the company. So you embed that in the onboarding process. Could be an idea. Another idea is at the end of the first month to sit with any new employee and sift through their LinkedIn connections, LinkedIn network, and see for people yourself and ask for intros. Like, that person is very interesting. Reach out to them and talk about the company. This is a bit pushy, so I don't know if I would do it myself, but I guess some people will like it. Cool. And then, so that's the main focus on preparation. Then sourcing, we'll just probably say a few words on the interview and the end of the pipeline, which is extending the offer, closing, onboarding, and then probably move. So there were some questions here, so probably answer a few questions then. What's your main advice on the end of the pipeline? Extending the offer, closing, onboarding the person. Did anything happen to you on these specific things that made you change your process?
I have one anecdote, which Robin, which might be interesting to tell here, which is the one person we struggled. So as remote is, we solve for like local requirements. So if we want to make an offer, we know how to make it compliant locally, and we found that it is very, very hard, but we made it a business and it's doable. The one time we struggled with one of these processes was when we tried to hire someone in a country where internet access is not a universally stable thing. So this person has internet access and they spoke with us multiple times, but also one time it rained and they were not able to speak with us. And this is the one time when we are like, how do we actually solve for this? Because we sort of assumed that we could just hire anyone from anywhere, and like the hard part is what we were solving, right? But turns out there's other hard parts, and one of them being internet access. So the way we solved it in this case is we actually bought them 2 internet lines, so that they are solved in that regard, and we could extend the offer. But we had to literally adjust our offer in this case to be able to get to that point. But to go back a little bit, I think the interview process, when you are fully remote, I often get a question like, how do you interview people? And I don't think it's very different. I always wonder what people do when they're together in the office. It's so incredibly valuable about seeing how tall someone is, or what kind of pants they're wearing, about whether they are the right person for the job. So if you ask yourself that question, like, how do I? It's the same thing, and actually it's much more structured, because people can be interviewed on their own time. You can make sure you have several people interviewing them. I think there's many little tips that I could advise, and all of them are about optimizing the experience for the employee. So the first one is that if you have multiple interview rounds, which you should have, right? You should not have that you just speak with one person and that's it. If you have multiple interview rounds, make sure that they're very close together so that the process is not very long. It's bad for everybody involved. As an employer, you're likely to lose the candidates to someone else, right? Because and it's also just not nice that process takes a very long time. So you want to compress that, and it really has to happen within a week or so. And then in that week should be multiple events. There should not be weeks and weeks between different interviews. And beyond that, making sure that the people interviewing them is a diverse set of people. You don't create an inclusive organization by interviewing and everyone that interviews you looks the same. If you are different than those people, then you won't feel like, oh, this isn't an organization where I will fit in. And if there's no other choice in that sense, then yeah, you have to address that somehow. Yeah, do you have further thoughts on the interview process, Robin?
Interview. I would say that no, most companies, especially startups, are used to running remote interview processes. It didn't change a lot for me. I don't think it changed a lot for our companies. And then, as you said, people realize, well, we've been running this in person for years, but why, right? Because when you meet in person, well, you talk about the same thing, and there's only there are only biases that could get into the game, right? As you said, the color of the pants or anything. So you don't want to be victim to these biases. And again, I think remote interview processes are better in lots of ways. The shorter, the better as well. I agree with that. Maybe to give you the general structure that we give to them, to our customers, usually what we do, so they'll start by having that conversation with the person, usually over email or something like that, then a phone screen, then move them as fast as possible to a technical interview, a tech assessment, or at least an assessment. So it's a tech interview for engineers, but it's an actual assessment for anyone else. And that assessment, what we recommend is do that in person, spend time with a person, especially engineers. When you're hiring on more volume jobs, then you'll probably want to send a test that they can do. But don't do that after the phone screen, because that's where you can sell the company and you can sell the role. So phone screen, then assessment, and then you can have 2 more rounds, one with the founders to test on the values, for instance, or assess something else, and then one with the teams. And that's usually what we do. And again, it's very easy to compress these 4 steps in 1 week, and that's definitely what we recommend. Okay, cool. So I think we can jump to the questions before we're at the end of our chat. Thanks a lot, Job. It was interesting, and what I like is that so what we do is we'll help companies hire, and a lot of them are hiring remotely, but what you do is you actually build your own team remotely. So that makes it even more interesting. So thanks for the learnings. So one of the questions we had was, how can you ensure that the process and the experience are the same in all countries? That's probably one for you.
Yeah, I don't think this is actually that hard. As long as you separate 2 parts, there's the bureaucratic bits that cannot be the same across countries. It's like there's requirements in each country in the world that you have to do particular things. There's boring stuff. It's like filling forms and whatnot. Everything else, like the true part of onboarding, it should be documented. Once you document something, it's easier to refer to it and say, this is how we do these things. And then you can iterate on it and improve it. And then there is nothing really different across countries. And all onboarding should include, meeting many people in the organization. It should include, starting to learn the context that they will be working in. Preferably having, like, we have this as well, where you have an onboarding buddy, so someone that can easily reach out to and ask them general questions about the company. Preferably like a random person from within the country, not someone that they are going to work with every single day, because then it's good to form another contact. And yeah, it doesn't really matter in which country in the world you are. All those things will work independently of where you are. It's just a little bit of bureaucratic first steps that might be different across countries. But then again, you take care of them and then you move on. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. Other than that, I don't think it's an issue.
There is something you mentioned though, which is benefits, right? You can offer the same benefit, but they will be felt differently around the world?
Yeah, it's a good point, Robin. So every country has different statutory benefits, right? Benefits you must offer as an employer, and so they will be different. I know for a fact that they are different in each country in the world, and in particular, if you think about United States, if you don't offer healthcare benefits in the United States, you're probably a bad employer. Inversely, if you offer them in Europe, you're one of very few, if any, that offer that, because most of the people in Europe, they have private healthcare already, or they have a public healthcare, or just don't want it subsidized through their employer. And so, this is of course a difference. And just as there's compensation differences, which I'm happy to get into, but I'll also get into in my workshop later today. That's something that I wouldn't worry too much about. It's best to just acknowledge the fact that countries are different and that the enrollment in those kind of things are different. Of course, my company, we solve for these kind of things. So we give you like a global plan for these for healthcare, for example. But yeah, ultimately, best to just acknowledge the fact they are different. So the process around it are slightly different. That's just the way it is. In the end, we all want the same thing. We want to make sure that if we get hurt, we don't go bankrupt. So, and hopefully this helps with that.
Right. And so it's important to say as well that you do give a workshop later, right? What is the title of the workshop?
I forgot what the title is of the
okay.
workshop.
But if you have
figuring out like global compliance, hiring people across the world, the kind of stuff that we do and that I know a lot about. So anyway, making jokes for 10 minutes. That's also
it's good that people know that you'll be available for the workshop as well, because there are usually less people, so you'll have more time to reply. And I do have a workshop as well focused on sourcing and building an outreach pipeline. I don't remember the name exactly, but if people want to join the workshop, I'd be happy to reply to that question as well. So we had one other question popping here, and then it disappeared. Right, links to workshops. Good. Is there one key point to focus on during the virtual onboarding phase? What would it be? So we're talking about onboarding, right? So after the person received and accepted the offer, and again, I would more say that's your area here. So what would you say, Jaap?
Yeah, getting to know each other. So the one thing that you lose by being virtual, by being remote, is walking into the office and seeing each other around the office. And when you first lose this, you don't miss it because you're like, this is great. I can hang out in my pajama all day. But if there's no replacement for it, you'll start to feel isolated or you start to feel alone. And that's actually not good. You want to actually be social with your colleagues because that forms connections, and those connections are valuable for you to just enjoy working with these people and to build a rapport with them. And so you have to replace this somehow. And so when you're onboarding, you have to assume that person knows nobody in the organization, and so you have to force them in a position where they start to form connections with people. And the only way to do this is to literally put two people together, tell them, have a conversation for 30 minutes, a coffee call, whatever you call it, or have lunch together virtually. And this is an absolute must. I think there's literally nothing more important doing this during onboarding. I would, if you want to do it well, you make sure that all new hires do at least 10 of these coffee calls, so 10 times 30 minutes spread over a week or two with random people around the organization, preferably actually random. So don't let them self-select, actually randomly match them up with the people in the organization, so that also people that were previously in the organization don't, self-select them, opt out, which would be bad as well, because then they only connect with people that have been there for longer. And also so that you don't get people to focus only on people that look like them or in similar departments. You just purposely want to make sure that people connect with other people around the organization. So I think that's the number one thing to focus on during onboarding. Everything else is what you would expect, which is just making sure someone can actually do their job.
Right, and I do have another question for you, specific to HireSweet. So before we had a Wii, and we played a lot of Mario Smash Bros on the Wii together, and now we're all working remotely. We moved to doing small games, like we played Among Us, we played the Scribble. Do you have any recommendation that people can use to play together during breaks?
Yeah, we play the same games. We have a Minecraft server. We play Dungeons and Dragons together. Whatever people like. I think Pictionary is extremely popular within our team, so that's one I recommend. Just what people feel like. It's just, I think games are a really, really, really good medium to get people together and to do these kind of things.
Cool. Feel free if you have other games ideas to share in the chat. We're looking for new games. Next question, how can you manage the asynchronous communication with candidates? I would say emails, or I would say emails during the interview process, but you have a smarter...
That's my answer as well. It's like, yeah, emails are by nature asynchronous. They're great. They don't bother you when you're sleeping, and so yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about this. If you want to test someone how good they are at asynchronous communication, just read their cover letter. Like if someone doesn't write well, that's a pretty good giveaway. But other than that, yeah, emails. Do the actual interview. Do it in person. It helps you, see the person, talk to them, which is probably an important part of their job. If it's not, then maybe you can skip it. But yeah.
I actually heard about a new product from a company called resource.io. They do a new product called Guide, and it's an interviewing guide for candidates, so they have everything in one place. You might want to check it out if emails are not good enough for you.
That's cool.
Would you use video games as part of the interview process? I would never do that personally. I would never do that. I feel like the more unbiased your interview process, the better. And I don't see how you could assess someone based on their performance during a video game. But again, maybe I haven't discovered the right video games. I would rather use a very specific example of their daily work, which is apparently the better predictor of an employee's future success. Is a piece of the work they'll actually do. So instead of playing video games, I would rather have them work on something they'll do on the job. Video games, there's just so much biases there. I can't imagine that could work. How about you?
I think it's mostly practically very hard to pull off something like that. So
yeah,
that's the main reason why I do it. I think it's good to do an activity together with someone to get to know them, but for an interview process, probably not appropriate. But I'd love to see someone create an interview game. I would love to try it.
And I'm not big fans either of companies doing lunches or dinners or drinks to assess someone and to assess the fit with the team, because again, it's very biased. So I wouldn't play Mario Kart to assess someone to join the team.
Yeah, no, that's terrible. I think that's a terrible idea. I would not recommend anyone to ever do that. Yeah, that's heavily biasing the experience. Yeah. Right. You're gonna hire a lot of great drinkers. So do you want that? No one would hire me.